The stars thinned until they weren't there at all. Talon Jesk eased the EECV First Light off her T3 pulse, ring stacks sighing as frame drag slack gave way to drift. Ahead, space looked polished, not empty. Emptiness has texture. This was absence, a matte corridor flanked by black bead-like buoys that swallowed the ship's radar pings as if they were rain against volcanic glass. Null-EM corridor, Malik Dorran muttered from engineering. Never seen one so clean. Captain Vance Orrell clasped the rail, watching a buoy pass the viewport like a blind eye. We're still on the Delta Fray outbound vector? 4.2 light-years from the rim, Red Colwyn said. This trench runs parallel to the VAR lines. If someone wanted to cross a battlefield without talking, this is where they'd go. Ivy Serrin listened as silence pressed on her headset. A thin band of thermal hiss, nothing else. The corridor drank radio, LiDAR, even the background microwave chatter. She shot a look at Security Chief Keir Maddox. He was already braced in the bay, coil carbine hanging low, jaw set. This matches the hash from the purple moon, not the signal itself, the hole it leaves. Same pattern of not there. Vance nodded once. Short scan only. Talon, drift thrust only. Use ring precession to cheat momentum. Aye. Talon sketched a course. Micro-warps that crawled like a tide. The WMI stacks shaving path length with each whisper. At T3, they moved like a careful swimmer. Any faster, and they'd thunder against whatever made the corridor. Contact, Keir said quietly. Cold object, 10 o'clock, 50 meters per second relative. Shape, ellipsoid, no active emissions. Scan for life, Vance said. Malik's voice, passive thermal suggests a core a few degrees above ambient. Internal structure looks wet. He hesitated. Micro-vibrational signature, harmonic with our ring ramp. That's odd. Ivy leaned in. The object's not broadcasting, but something inside's echoing our pulses, like it knows what we're doing. Rhett folded his arms. Or the VAR set bait. They eased closer. The thing was the size of a small car, skin like translucent hex ribbing that seemed to refuse the light Ivy shone. No seams, no ports, just a membranous window and the faint leaf-like brush of something within. Vance took it in. Maddox, you're right, it could be bait, but if that's a pod with a person in it— I know, Keir said, not happily. We can bring it into Bay 2 with the quarantine cage live. Engineering, Vance said. Can you ride precession to pull without showing our hand? Malik exhaled, the sound a smile. Grav-script. We'll sing in subaudible and hope no one's listening. Grav-script wasn't a language so much as a cautionary hymn, tiny modulations in warp bias that made the space between ship and target shorter in a rhythm only nearby mass could feel. Talon teased the ring stacks into a lazy waltz. The pod slid toward them as if the first light were the bottom of a well. Ivy watched the corridor's buoys. Nothing moved, nothing flickered, yet her hairs on her arms refused to lie down. When the pod kissed the magnetic lip of Bay 2, Keir sealed the gate and dropped the quarantine field. Malik's drones hosed the cage with ion wash and speckled light. The bay smelled like cold metal and seaweed. Up close, the pod's window was a lidless eye. Inside the fluid, a being floated, not remotely human. Plates like thin glass layered over tendrilled fronds that expanded and furled with the unhurried patience of kelp. Faint bioluminescent dots pulsed along its spine. A 3-beat rhythm Ivy could already feel herself counting against her own heart. Species? Rhett asked. Malik shook his head. Unknown. Polity markers on the outer shell look like Sir glyphs, but they're refracted. Ivy's hands itched. Let me try a light call. Keir's look said he'd rather fight a sun with a knife. In a null corridor, everything we do is a flare. Not EM, Ivy said. Reflected lumens inside the cage, no emission past the field. If they're awake enough to echo our ring ramp, they may be reading pulses. Keir glanced at Vance. Vance nodded.
2 minutes, Serrin. If anything moves out there, we scuttle and run." Ivy stepped into the bay. Up close, the pod's window threw back her reflection in a dozen broken versions. She set her lamp to a crisp strobe and sent a simple pattern: short, short, long, pause, repeat, a child's knock. Her grandmother had taught her ham code in a farmhouse that moaned in winter. This felt like that, a conversation with a world that could be known by how it answered. The being's dots quickened: short, 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 long. Then it stopped. "I think that's—" I swallowed. "I think that's yes." "To what?" Rhett asked. "To being here," Ivy said. She tried another sequence, gentle, a rising scale in light. The being answered with a ringing cascade in its own bioluminescence that ran from spine to filaments like a wind over grass. The pod's membrane tensed, then resolved a seam Ivy hadn't seen before. A small valve dilated, revealing a hex of dark glass, inset with symbols like the geometry of frost. Malik leaned over the console. "That's a lock, or a memory window." "Don't open it," Keir snapped. "Wasn't planning to," Malik said mildly. He slid a sensor over the hex and mapped it in reflective, soundless laser. "This is a once-right substrate, keyed to a specific spectral fingerprint." "Whose?" Vance frowned. Before anyone could answer, the first light shivered. Not from within, from the corridor. "Contact," Talon said, very soft. "A wedge silhouette dropped into our horizon line. No EM, no thermal. Mass says cruiser class. It's painting the corridor with kinetic code." Rhett's mouth thinned. "VAR." On the main screen, light bent like it had changed its mind, a teal ripple crawling along the corridor spine. In the ripple's wake, something like a ship appeared, all edges and angles, crimson tracer lines crawling its black skin. Predator. Patient.
"Firm script off," Vance said. "Drift." Talon obeyed. The first light became a leaf, not a swimmer. The Vire cullcraft didn't seem to see them, seemed to see everything else. It raked the corridor with some unreadable pattern. The spindle buoys pulsed once, twice, their matte skins running with red like capillaries waking. Keir's hands hovered over deploy keys. "If they sweep the corridor again, they'll see our distortion at the gate. We're a wrinkle." "Malik, can you smudge us?" Vance said. "We can breathe the rings in sync with their sweep and throw our wake into the buoy phase. It'll brand the ship, might scratch paint, might set the rings to boiling." "Do it," Vance said. "I'd rather change the paint than get turned into one." Ivy kept her lamp lowered, feeling the thing in the pod watching her. She whispered for no one but herself, "Hold still." The first light sighed again, rings humming at the edge of perception. The Vire's crimson code washed over them like a storm and slid past to break against Malik's falsified echo. The nearest spindle buoy flared, drunk on their borrowed signature, and exhaled a black mist that folded back into it. The Vire turned toward the flare like a shark toward blood. "Now," Talon murmured, fingers dancing over micro-warp bias. The first light eased backwards into the corridor's shadow as the Vire hunted its own reflection. For 3 heartbeats, 4, then people were breathing again. The corridor led to night. They took it. Only when the cullcraft was a memory did Vance speak. "Report!" "Rings hot, but stable," Malik said. "We've been marked." He sent the hull cam view to the main screen. A smear of black dust clung to the forward plates, clotted like oil around the seam lines. Within it, a shape, a recursive sigil that seemed to curve into itself no matter the angle. Human eyes refused to settle on it. "Doctrine sigil," Malik said. "Their version of a tracker or a truth." Keir set his jaw. "Get it off me. We're working on it." Vance faced the bay again. The being in the pod floated, patient. The hex window glinted dark. Ivy raised her hand and tapped the glass with 3 slow pulses. "Are you hurt?" The being answered with a soft roll of light along its filaments. Malik read the heartbeat as a graph. Metabolic rate low. Suspended function by design. If we lift the pod into medical quarantine, we can maintain conditions. "Do it," Vance said. "Rhett, chart us a path out of the corridor. No more parallel with the warfront." Rhett didn't move. "Captain, they left this corridor for a reason. And if those buoys are drinking EM, they're a wall. Someone built a road behind it." "Someone who hates talking," Ivy murmured. She carried the pod's lamp back to its cradle. As the drones lifted the cylinder toward the med cage, she saw a flicker inside the hex window. Something like a constellation, except moving. A map encoded in interference pattern. She recorded it from the corner of her eye, not on main systems, an old field habit. When she looked back, the image had already faded. Keir logged his descent because that was the ritual that kept them honest. Rescuing unknown pods inside a null corridor with an enemy cruiser present is a gamble we should not take again. He sighed, text scrolling under his thumb. "But I don't leave people to drown." Hours later, when the ship had found a sliver of ordinary stars and Malik had bled the ring stacks cool, Ivy stood in medical's dim light as the being, Hira, Xur, stirred. Its bioluminescence arranged itself into the 3-beat pattern, then wove a new lane. Long, short, long. She answered in kind with her lamp, and the being's vitreous plates flexed once, twice, like someone looking up through water. Its voice, when it came, wasn't sound. It was a pressure in the walls, barely there, and a wash of light across its filaments that Malik's translator could only render as careful syllables. "Archivist Mele Char," the console said in a flat tick. Ivy's heart knocked. "Xur Alliance Courier. Carrying record of purest doctrine breach at Vire Warfront. Seeking safe vector past the Courier lines." "Courier lines?" Rhett echoed. "Places that sing," Ivy said softly, eyes on the being. The translator chewed the next light phrase longer, struggling to find edges. "Warning! Purist doctrine measures civilizations by voice-to-silence ratio. Your engine sings too loud. Their creed, unburden the lattice. This corridor is a throat to their black garden." On the screen above the pod, a map unfurled from the recorder she'd ghosted. A chain of coordinates knotted like beads, one notably marked with a glyph that looked like a hand opening. 8 light-years deeper, a pause in the Vire's red tide. "Can you survive without your pod?" Vance asked finally. The being's plates flexed in what the translator translated as a laugh. "No, but I can think loudly." Keir made a face that was almost a smile. "Now there's someone who will get along with our pilot." Vance clasped the rail again, feeling the lines between caution and courage pull taut. "Rhett, log it. Directive updates. We don't get to be bystanders." Rhett's fingers were already moving. Ivy looked up from the pod and caught Vance's eye. He saw the farm girl who'd listened to Winter speak in antenna hiss and made sense of it. She saw a captain who kept collecting strangers because he couldn't help himself. When she finally reached her berth, Ivy watched the map again in the dim. The marked point, 8 light-years ahead, pulsed slowly. Not an invitation, not a trap, something in between. She set the clip to loop and slept as if she were listening to a distant lighthouse. In the morning watch, Malik reported that the doctrine sigil had refused both acid and abrasion. It clung to the hull like a promise. "Then we'll carry it," Vance said, staring at the stars beyond normal space, "until we find the kind of voice that can answer it."